You ever have one of those neighbors who think they run the whole neighborhood? Yeah, that's Karen. Now, I'm not talking about just any old HOA busybody. I mean, this woman's made it her personal life mission to make sure every blade of grass is at a uniform height and every car in the driveway is HOA approved. When my wife and I bought our house, big corner lot, custom pool, beautiful landscaping, it came with one of those gated community HOAs. I figured, all right, they'll keep things tidy. Fine. But I didn't know what I was signing up for. See, we moved here because we wanted peace. My wife, Hannah, and I both work from home. We're quiet. We mind our own business. We even added a pool in the backyard for some weekend relaxation. It wasn't open to anyone else, strictly private property. But that didn't stop Karen. First week after the pool was done, she dropped by with that smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, hi, John. We just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood," she chirped, eyeing the pool through the fence like a hawk. Her "we" was her and her husband. Bob, quiet man, always looked like he regretted his life choices. Karen leaned on the fence and said, "I heard you have a lovely pool. You know, the HOA has been thinking about starting a community swim program. Isn't that exciting?" I gave her a polite chuckle. "That sounds great, Karen, but this pool's on my private property." She nodded, but I could see the wheels turning. "Oh, of course. But maybe just once in a while we could host a few neighbors here. Kids' events, family days." "No, ma'am," I said firmly. "This pool's not open for HOA use. Liability issues, you understand." Her smile faltered. I'll have to check the bylaws on that." And that's where the trouble started. A week later, I got my first HOA notice. Non-compliant structure visible from the common area. It was my pool house. Perfectly permitted, inspected, and built to code. Then came another one. Unauthorized water feature. Then another. Fence height variance. 3 violations in 10 days. Now, I'm not a hothead. I know how these games go, so I sent copies of my permits, photos, and even the contractor's license to the HOA office. A few days later, I got a call from their compliance chair. You guessed it, Karen. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "John, I received your documentation, but unfortunately, the board voted to uphold the fines. You can appeal at our next meeting, of course." I sighed. "Fine. I'll be there." That meeting was when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about power. Karen sat at the head of the table, practically glowing with authority. The rest of the board looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She opened with, "Mr. Lawson, we've had numerous complaints about your property, particularly your exclusive use of the pool." I blinked. "Excuse me?" A man from down the street raised his hand. Karen said it was supposed to be a shared HOA amenity. I almost laughed. "No, sir. I paid for it, I maintain it, and it's in my backyard. There's nothing shared about it." Karen smiled coldly. "We'll have to review the property boundaries." I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Already did. County assessor map. The fence line's exactly where it should be. The room went quiet. Karen's face twitched. "We'll look into this further." After that, the fines stopped. But the attitude didn't. Every time I mowed, Karen was there, clipboard in hand. Every time I had friends over, she'd appear, checking for noise violations. Then, one Saturday, it went too far. It was my niece's birthday. 10-year-old kid, just a small pool party with family. A few balloons, some BBQ, nothing wild. Halfway through, Karen walked right into my backyard. No knocking, no permission. Just pushed open the gate and strutted in like she owned the place. "Excuse me," I said, walking up. "You can't just come back here." She crossed her arms. "As HOA president, I have the right to inspect shared amenities." "There's been a complaint about unauthorized guests." I laughed, incredulous. "This is my property, Karen. You need to leave." She pulled out her phone. "If you refuse to cooperate, I'll call the police." I stepped aside, gesturing to the gate. "Go ahead, I'll wait," she dialed, looking smug the whole time. "Yes, officer?" "I'm at 121 Lakewood Drive. Homeowner refusing HOA access." 10 minutes later, 2 squad cars pulled up. The officers got out looking confused. "Ma'am," one said, "what exactly is the emergency?" Karen pointed dramatically. "He's denying community pool access." The officer looked at me, then at the fence, then back at her. "You mean his private backyard?" Karen hesitated. "Well, technically the HOA, ma'am, this is private property. You can't just enter someone's yard. You're trespassing." Her face went pale. The officer turned to me. "Sir, would you like to press charges?" I smiled politely. "Not today, officer, but I'd like her to leave." Karen stormed off, muttering threats under her breath. But as she left, I caught something in her eyes. Anger, sure, but also something else. A flicker of fear. That's when I realized she'd bitten off more than she could chew, because I wasn't just some guy with a pool. I had something she didn't know about, something that was about to turn the tables completely. After that day, the air around our neighborhood got thick. You could almost feel Karen's hatred radiating from across the street. She stopped waving. She stopped pretending to be polite. And most importantly, she started plotting. For the next few weeks, I kept to myself. I cleaned the pool, mowed the lawn, and went about my work. But every time I looked out the window, I'd catch her watching. Sometimes from her porch, sometimes walking her little white dog just a bit too slowly past my fence. Now, I've dealt with people like Karen before. They don't quit, they escalate. So I decided to get ahead of her. That's when I called my buddy, Dave. He's a real estate attorney, one of those guys who can quote county ordinances like song lyrics. I told him everything. The trespassing, the fake violations, the police call, all of it. He laughed. "Sounds like you got yourself a textbook HOA dictator. But hey, let's have a little fun with this. Send me the HOA charter and your property plat." I scanned everything that night and sent it over. 2 days later, Dave called me back. His voice had that tone, the kind people get when they find gold where no one else was looking. "John," he said, "you're gonna love this. You know how your property sits on the outer corner of the subdivision?" "Yeah," I replied. "Biggest lot in the circle. Why?" "Because according to the original developer documents, your lot isn't technically part of the HOA." I blinked. "What?" he chuckled. "Looks like when the neighborhood was first platted, your land was zoned as agricultural. The HOA expanded later, but they never properly amended the deed to include your parcel. You're outside their jurisdiction. You don't owe dues, you're not bound by their bylaws, and Karen's authority means absolutely nothing over you." I leaned back in my chair, grinning. "So she's been barking up the wrong tree this whole time." "Exactly," he said. "But don't tell her yet. Let her hang herself with her own rope." "Oh, I like the sound of that." "See? There's a kind of satisfaction that comes when you realize your enemy has no idea they've already lost." Over the next week, I played it cool. Karen sent 2 more warning letters. Failure to trim hedges. Improper storage of pool equipment. I framed them, literally. Hung them right inside my office as trophies. Then came the big one. A bright orange envelope taped to my front door. Final notice. Board authorized action pending. I opened it up and laughed out loud. She was threatening lien action against my property over unpaid HOA dues and non-compliance penalties. I couldn't resist. I wrote back, "Dear Mrs. Thompson, I appreciate your enthusiasm for neighborhood governance. However, you appear to have made a critical administrative oversight. My property, as per county records and the original subdivision plat, is not and has never been part of the Lakewood HOA. Please cease and desist from further correspondence or risk legal consequences for harassment. Sincerely, John Lawson. 2 hours later, my phone rang. John, we need to talk, Karen snapped. Oh, hi, Karen. I just sent you a letter about that. I received it, she said through gritted teeth. You're mistaken. Every property here is part of the HOA. Not mine, I said cheerfully. Would you like me to forward you the county assessor's file? There was a pause. I could practically hear her jaw tightening. That can't be correct. The HOA maintains the streetlights, the signage, which stop at the end of my driveway. I interrupted. Silence. She finally said, We'll be consulting our legal team. Please do, I replied, and hung up. Now, most folks would have stopped there, enjoyed the victory, and let it be. But not me, because Karen wasn't done, and neither was I. The next morning, I woke up to find a group of workers unloading bags of gravel and wood beams in front of my fence. Hey, fellas, I called. What's all this? HOA order, one of them said. We're putting in a path to connect the pool access gate to the community trail. I nearly laughed. You mean this gate? I pointed to the private locked fence that opened into my yard. They nodded. Karen said it's a shared entrance. Oh, she was bold. Very bold. I made a quick call to Dave. Send me a certified letter and call the sheriff's office, I said. We've got ourselves a situation. By noon, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived. Karen, of course, came strutting out in full glory. Clipboard, sunglasses, smug smile. Officers, she said sweetly. Thank you for coming. This homeowner is obstructing community development. The taller deputy raised an eyebrow. You mean he's objecting to you building on his land? She frowned. Well, it's technically HOA property. Ma'am, I said, pulling a folder from my hand, this is my deed, my plat map, and the zoning record. Your so-called HOA property ends 22 feet before this fence. The deputy took the documents, looked them over, then turned to Karen. He's right. You're trespassing again. Her face turned beet red. I'll be contacting our lawyers. You do that, the deputy said, handing her the papers. But in the meantime, step back. You're on private land. Karen stormed off again, muttering something about ungrateful residents. The workers shrugged, packed up, and left. I thought that might have been the end of it, but I underestimated just how far she'd go. Because 2 nights later, just after midnight, my security camera caught something unbelievable. Karen and another man, looked like her husband, sneaking around my side yard with a flashlight. I watched the footage the next morning, stunned. They were trying to cut the lock on my pool gate. That's when I knew it was time to stop playing defense. Because if Karen wanted a war, I was more than ready to give her one. And what I had planned next? Well, let's just say she'd wish she'd never even looked at my pool. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee and staring at my security monitor. There they were, Karen and her husband, creeping through my side yard with a flashlight like a couple of raccoons in cardigans. At one point, Bob actually whispered, Karen, this is breaking and entering. She hissed, It's community property. Bob, he's got no right to lock it. Then she tried the lock cutter. Sparks flew. Then a loud clang when she dropped it on the patio stones. Bob jumped. We're going to get caught. Karen snapped back. We'll just say we were inspecting. That's when my motion-activated sprinklers kicked in. The high-pressure ones. Karen shrieked so loud I almost spilled my coffee watching. They scrambled out like a pair of soaked cats. I couldn't help but laugh, but then I stopped smiling. Because breaking into someone's property, even attempting to, isn't funny. It's criminal. I called Dave again. Got something you'll want to see, I told him. Caught her red-handed on camera. He came by that afternoon. I showed him the footage. He leaned back, whistling. She's done. You can press charges for trespassing and attempted property damage. But you know what? He grinned. I've got a better idea. Oh? Yeah, let's bait her into doing it again. Legally. Then make her own board vote her out. Now, that sounded like my kind of revenge. Dave drafted a notice for me. A formal revocation of implied access rights. Basically, it said any HOA representatives entering my property without written permission would be trespassing and subject to prosecution. We sent copies to every HOA board member, certified mail. Then I upgraded my cameras. 4 new ones. High resolution, night vision, audio recording, and the best part, signs posted all along the fence. Warning: 24-hour video and audio surveillance. Trespassers will be prosecuted. That alone should have scared any sane person. But we weren't dealing with sane. The following weekend, I decided to stir the pot a bit. I threw a private pool celebration for my niece again. Invited a few family friends, some music, good food. Nothing outrageous. Just a happy gathering. Within 15 minutes, I spotted her. Karen. Standing at the end of her driveway with her phone out, recording. A few minutes later, I heard a familiar voice. My neighbor Jeff, who lived 2 doors down. He leaned over the fence. Hey John, is it true Karen says you're charging admission to the HOA pool? I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the tongs. Admission? It's my backyard, he chuckled. Yeah, that's what I figured. She's been telling everyone you're illegally profiting off a community amenity. That woman's imagination had no brakes. That night, after everyone left, I checked my cameras again. Nothing unusual. Until about 2:14 a.m., there she was. Again. But this time, she wasn't alone. She'd brought a clipboard, a measuring tape, and what looked like a flashlight camera. She was documenting my yard. She whispered into her phone, "Recording for board review. This structure appears non-compliant. Pool is being used commercially." I actually said out loud, "Lady, are you serious?" She moved closer to the fence, shining her flashlight through the slats, snapping photos, muttering to herself. That's when the motion sensor lights blazed on. Floodlights, bright as stadium beams. She froze like a deer in headlights. Then, I triggered the new feature I'd installed earlier that day. My motion-activated speaker. A deep, pre-recorded voice boomed through the night. "Warning! You are being recorded! Step away from the property!" Karen screamed, actually screamed, dropped her clipboard, and bolted. I stood there at the window, laughing so hard I had tears in my eyes. But what came next was even better. The next morning, she sent a community-wide email blast titled Urgent HOA Action, Homeowner Violating Community Rules. She attached a blurry photo of my pool, circled in red, and accused me of illegally operating a private business and harassing HOA board members. She CC'd everyone, the entire neighborhood, but she made one fatal mistake. She included a photo taken after midnight from my side yard. From inside my property line, Dave saw it and smiled. Perfect. She just admitted to trespassing in writing. We called the sheriff's office again, this time with a full report. Time-stamped footage, email evidence, and the clip of her sneaking through my gate. The deputy who showed up was the same one from before. He looked at the video, then at me, shaking his head. "Guess she didn't learn the first time," he said. "Don't worry, sir. We'll handle it." That afternoon, they paid her a visit. I was watering the front garden when I saw the patrol car pull up in front of her house. 2 deputies walked up to her door. Karen came out, still wearing that HOA badge on her chest, like it was a sheriff's star. She tried talking fast, waving her arms, pointing toward my property, until one deputy handed her a piece of paper. Her face went white. It was a formal trespass warning. "Now, You'd think that would have been the end of it. But no, because for Karen, humiliation wasn't a deterrent, it was a spark. That night, her light stayed on until nearly 1 a.m. I saw people coming and going, probably the rest of the HOA board. Something was brewing, and I had a feeling the next move wouldn't be subtle, so I decided to get ahead of her one last time. I told Dave, "Let's pull the pin." He grinned. "You mean the clause?" "Yep," I said. "Let's show her what happens when you mess with someone who actually reads the fine print." See, what Karen didn't know was that my property wasn't just outside the HOA's control. It included the main water line that supplied the HOA clubhouse and their little community pool. And if she wanted to keep playing games over pool access, well, she was about to find out what losing access really looked like. By that point, I'd had enough of Karen's nonsense, enough of her fake violations, enough of her late-night prowling, and definitely enough of her calling the cops over something she had no claim to. But I wasn't going to yell, scream, or make a scene. Nope. I was going to do what Karen would never expect. Outsmart her by the book. See, when Dave told me my property line included part of the main utility easement that the HOA used to run their irrigation and water feed to the clubhouse pool, I didn't think much of it at first. But now it was the key to poetic justice. We met at my kitchen table, papers spread out like a battle plan. Dave pointed to a shaded strip on the plat map. "Right here, John. This is where their water line crosses your land. The HOA never formalized the easement, meaning they don't have a legal right to it." "Meaning," I said slowly, "I can control that access." He nodded. "As long as you don't cut their supply off maliciously. But you can restrict use for safety, construction, or maintenance. And since they've been harassing you," I grinned, "it's time for some maintenance." The next morning, I drafted a polite, professional notice on letterhead. Notice of temporary water line. Access restriction. Due to necessary inspection and maintenance of private property infrastructure, access to the secondary water line will be temporarily suspended until further notice. All affected parties are advised to refrain from usage or entry onto the property during this period. John Lawson. I posted one on the HOA bulletin board, another on the clubhouse gate, and one more, just for fun, on Karen's mailbox. Then, with Dave's help, I filed the document with the county utility office. It was 100% legitimate. 2 days later, it began. The HOA pool went dry. At first, people thought it was a pump failure. Then the sprinklers stopped. Then the clubhouse bathrooms went out of order. By midweek, chaos. Residents were calling Karen nonstop. "Why's there no water at the clubhouse? What happened to the pool? Is this another budget issue?" And there she was, sweating bullets in her sundress, trying to calm everyone down. "We're experiencing a temporary supply disruption," she said at a community meeting. "It's being addressed." Oh, it was being addressed all right, by her own arrogance. She sent me another email that night. Short, hostile, and in all caps. "John, you've crossed a line. The HOA will take legal action if you don't restore water service immediately." I wrote back just as politely, "Dear Mrs. Thompson, the HOA's infrastructure is using private property without a valid easement. Until we resolve this legally, access remains restricted. You are free to consult your attorney. Regards, John Lawson." 2 hours later, I saw her pacing up and down her driveway on the cameras, her phone glued to her ear, her husband trailing behind like a ghost. By morning, I got an official notice from Lakewood HOA Legal Counsel. It was a demand letter, full of fancy words like cease, desist, and willful interference. Dave read it, snorted, and said, "They don't have a leg to stand on." He called their lawyer directly. "Hey, before you embarrass yourself, you might want to review your client's property lines. The county records make it clear. The HOA's been using private infrastructure illegally for years. An hour later, Karen showed up at my door, red-faced, shaking, holding a stack of papers. "You can't do this," she barked. "You're cutting off services for the entire community." I looked her dead in the eye. "No, Karen. The HOA did that when they started harassing a homeowner they had no authority over." She jabbed a finger at me. "You're petty. You're vindictive. This is criminal." I raised an eyebrow. "Criminal, you say? You mean like breaking into someone's property with bolt cutters? Because I've got the footage of that. And a trespass warning to match." Her mouth opened, then closed again. "No words, Karen," I said quietly. "This could have all been avoided if you'd just stayed on your side of the fence." She stormed off, shouting something about lawsuits. But I knew it was bluster, because when you're wrong and recorded, there's no comeback strong enough. That weekend, the HOA board held an emergency meeting, open to residents. I wasn't invited, but that didn't stop people from filling me in. Apparently, Karen tried to pin everything on me, accused me of sabotaging the neighborhood. But when one of the members, a guy named Henry, stood up and asked, "Why are we using his private property for water in the first place?" the whole room went quiet. Then he added, "And if we're not even paying him for it, isn't that illegal?" Karen's face turned crimson. Someone else piped up. "Didn't you tell us he was part of the HOA?" "Of course he is," she snapped. Then another voice said, "County says otherwise." And just like that, the room turned. I didn't need to be there to know how it went down. By the next morning, a neighbor forwarded me an email. Subject: Board Decision. Immediate Leadership Review. Dear residents, due to recent developments regarding property boundaries and HOA operations, the board has voted to suspend President Karen Thompson pending investigation. Lakewood HOA Bordeaux. It was beautiful. The mighty HOA queen, dethroned by her own arrogance. But the story wasn't over yet. Because when you take power away from someone like Karen, they don't fade quietly. They come back louder, meaner, and more desperate than ever. And what she did next? Well, that's when things got personal. Losing that president's seat did something to her. Some people accept defeat, take a breath, and move on. Not Karen. She doubled down. For the first week, it was quiet. Too quiet. No letters, no phone calls, no snide looks across the hedge. Then, like clockwork, the storm rolled back in. It started small. Trash mysteriously appearing by my curb the night before pickup. Not mine, but bags from other houses. Then, flyers stuffed in mailboxes around the neighborhood. Unsigned, but everyone knew the handwriting. Beware of residents who don't support community values. Some homeowners think they're above the rules. Classic Karen, poisoning the well when she couldn't control the faucet. I ignored it at first. You can't reason with rumor. But when my wife's car got keyed outside the grocery store, I stopped playing nice. Hannah stood by the hood, eyes wide, tracing a long silver scratch that spelled 3 crooked letters, HOA. I took pictures, called the sheriff, and filed a report. The deputy just sighed. Same neighborhood? Same lady? Yep, he shook his head. We'll log it. Try not to engage. People like that burn themselves out. Maybe, but I wasn't counting on patience. Instead, I built one last trap. Dave helped me draft a letter to the interim HOA board, civil, courteous, and public. To the Lakewood board, given the ongoing confusion regarding property boundaries and shared utilities, I invite the HOA to a transparent on-site review. I'll open my gates, show the documentation, and will clarify the issue once and for all. Please include any members who wish to attend. John Lawson. We mailed it to every homeowner. Karen couldn't resist a stage, and this would give her one. That Saturday, a small crowd gathered near my fence. The sun was sharp, the kind that bleaches everything too bright. I'd set up a table with maps, deeds, and a cooler of drinks. Neighborhood diplomacy at its finest. Karen showed up 15 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and the same clipboard she'd carried since the beginning of this mess. She looked like a politician who'd just been voted out but refused to leave the podium. "Well," she said loudly, "I hope we can end this nonsense today." "Me too," I said. "Let's clear it up once and for all." Dave stepped forward and unrolled the county plat map. "As you can all see, the HOA boundary stops right here." He tapped the line with a pen. "Mr. Lawson's parcel is outside of it, which means," Karen cut in, "that's wrong. Those maps are outdated." "County clerk certified last year," Dave said calmly. "Would you like the stamp number?" A murmur rippled through the small crowd. Karen's voice rose. "You think you can just rewrite history? This community was founded together." I met her gaze. "No one's rewriting anything, Karen. We're just reading the part you skipped." She snatched the paper off the table, crumpling it. "You think you're clever. You humiliated me, cut off the water, and turned everyone against me." I didn't respond. I just watched her unravel. Her husband, Bob, tried to whisper something, but she waved him off. "No, he doesn't deserve peace. He deserves consequences." And that's when she said it, the line that sealed her fate. "If the law won't make him follow the rules, we'll make him wish he had." Every phone in that crowd was recording. Dave, standing beside me, whispered, "Got it." Karen realized too late what she'd done. She spun toward the group, eyes wide, voice cracking. "I didn't mean—" But it was over by Monday. The video was everywhere, posted in the neighborhood group, shared to the local community forum, even sent to the sheriff's department. Threats, intimidation, vandalism, all on record. The HOA board issued a statement the next day. "Effective immediately, Karen Thompson is permanently removed from all HOA duties and barred from representing the association in any capacity. Legal review pending." Then came the cherry on top. "Remember that waterline easement? Dave helped me file a retroactive lease agreement with the HOA. From now on, if they wanted water access, they'd pay a monthly maintenance fee, directly to me." The new board agreed without hesitation. They even sent me a thank you basket. It took a few weeks for things to settle. Neighbors started waving again. Kids played in their yards. The air lost that tight, bitter edge. One evening, I sat by my pool, my private pool, listening to the crickets and thinking about everything that had happened. People like Karen think power lives in a clipboard or a title. But real power, that's in patience, paperwork, and knowing exactly when to strike. Just before I went inside, headlights rolled past my driveway. Karen's car. She slowed down, stared through the open gate at the glow of the water. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost, because you can't fix someone who needs control more than they need peace. I raised my glass toward her taillights and whispered, "Here's to boundaries." Then I turned off the pool lights and let the quiet swallow the night. I thought it was over. For a while it even felt that way. The sun seemed warmer, the air quieter, the neighborhood friendlier. People who had once crossed the street to avoid eye contact now stopped by my gate just to say hello. A few even apologized. "Didn't know the full story, John," one man said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Karen had us believing you were running some kind of operation out here." I laughed it off, but inside, I felt that slow, satisfying pulse of justice. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. The pool sparkled again. The fence was fixed, and the cameras came down. For the first time in months, I could enjoy a Saturday morning without wondering who was plotting what behind some HOA email thread. But peace never lasts long when someone like Karen is involved. About 3 weeks after the video went viral, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, Inside were copies of old HOA records, meeting notes, and a hand-scrawled letter that read, "You think you've won, but you'll regret crossing the wrong people." The signature was just a looping K. I remember standing there, in the driveway, staring at that paper like it might catch fire in my hands. I wasn't angry, just tired. But Dave, my lawyer, he was amused. "She's bluffing," he said when I showed him. "But let's find out what kind of bluff it is." He filed a request with the county records office to check if anyone had recently filed property-related claims or HOA complaints with my address. 2 days later, he called me. "You're not going to believe this," he said, half laughing. "Karen filed for a retroactive easement request on your pool area. She's claiming it's historically communal property." I nearly dropped my coffee. "She's what?" "She's trying to rewrite your deed history," he said. "Filed under the HOA's name, too. Only problem, she doesn't represent the HOA anymore." That's when I realized she wasn't fighting for the HOA anymore. She was fighting for her ego. Dave prepared a response so airtight it could have choked a hurricane. Every clause, every timestamp, every surveyor's note. He even included pictures of the pool before the HOA existed, just to twist the knife. A week later, the county sent its ruling. Karen's claim was not only dismissed, it was flagged as fraudulent. The county clerk forwarded the case to the sheriff's office for review. And that's when everything really started unraveling. Bob, her husband, came by my place one evening. He looked worn down, like a man who'd been living under a roof made of lightning. "She's not sleeping," he said quietly. "She keeps talking about proving everyone wrong. Keeps saying she's got one last move." I offered him a seat. "Bob, she's got to stop before she hurts herself. Or someone else." He nodded, eyes hollow. "I know, I've tried, but she won't listen to me anymore." He left soon after, and I watched his car disappear down the street. For a second I almost felt sorry for him. Living with someone so consumed by control must have been its own kind of prison. 2 nights later, I woke up to motion alerts from my security app. The gate camera, the driveway, then the pool deck. I opened the feed and froze. Karen, standing at the edge of my pool, barefoot, in a nightgown, clutching something metallic, her old clipboard. Her reflection shimmered in the water, distorted, eerie. She was mumbling to herself, pacing back and forth. I could barely make out the words. This was ours. All of it, ours. My wife stirred beside me. "What's wrong?" "Stay inside," I whispered. "Call 911. I slipped on my jacket and walked quietly out the back door, keeping a safe distance. The pool lights were on. She must have found the switch. "Karen!" I called softly. She froze, slowly turned. For a moment, there was silence. Just the hum of the filter and the distant sound of crickets. "You stole it," she hissed. "You took it from all of us." "I didn't take anything," I said carefully. "You need to go home." Her hands trembled around the clipboard. "You embarrassed me. You made me look like a fool. You did that yourself." She let out a shaky laugh, more like a sob. "Maybe, but I'm not leaving until everyone knows the truth." I didn't move. I just watched as she dropped the clipboard into the pool and turned toward the fence. Red and blue lights flashed against the trees a few seconds later. The deputies moved in quietly, speaking to her in calm tones, leading her away. She didn't resist. She just kept whispering, "It was ours. It was ours." I stood there long after they left, watching the clipboard sink to the bottom, its papers dissolving in the water. By morning, the news spread again. Not the scandalous kind this time, just sad murmurs. Karen had been taken for a mental evaluation. The HOA board issued a brief statement about her temporary leave of absence from community involvement. Bob sold the house 3 weeks later and moved to Florida. And just like that, The storm was gone. The new HOA president, a quiet, no-nonsense woman named Rachel, dropped by one day with a smile and a handshake. "Thanks for your patience," she said. "We're cleaning up the mess she left behind. Oh, and we voted to dissolve any claim on your property for good." I nodded. "Appreciate that." As she left, I looked out at my pool, still peaceful, untouched. For the first time in nearly a year, it felt like mine again. But as the sun dipped behind the trees, something in me stayed alert, not afraid, just aware. Because if I've learned one thing from all this, it's that control doesn't die easily, and sometimes, even when the noise fades, the echoes hang around a little longer. 3 months passed. The neighborhood felt lighter. The constant whispering was gone. The HOA newsletter was actually helpful for once, and the pool stood clear and calm again, like it had never been at the center of chaos. I had stopped expecting drama. No more surprise envelopes. No more midnight arguments. Just morning coffee, work, and quiet weekends. Then one afternoon, as I was skimming through emails on the back porch, I heard the gravel crunch near my front gate. A car door opened, then closed. When I looked up, my heart paused for a moment. Karen. She looked smaller. Her usual confidence was gone. Her hair, once perfect and stiff, now fell loose around her shoulders. No sunglasses, no clipboard, just a simple canvas bag hanging from her arm. I didn't move. She approached slowly, like someone walking on ice. "John," she said, her voice soft, almost hoarse. "I'm not here to argue." "I wasn't planning to either," I replied carefully. She gave a weak smile. "That's fair." Silence hung between us, the kind of silence that feels too heavy for words. Finally, she said, "I wanted to apologize. That wasn't what I expected. Not from her. Not ever. I lost myself," she continued, her eyes darting toward the pool. "When you denied the HOA access, it felt like something sacred was being taken away. That pool, it meant more to me than you could have known." I frowned. "Karen, it's just a pool." Her lips trembled. "Not to me." She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn photo. It was an old picture, maybe 25 years back. A little girl splashing in the same pool, a golden retriever barking beside her, sunlight on her face. "Who's that?" I asked quietly. "My daughter," Karen whispered. Her name was Emily. The word was hit like a quiet thunderclap. "She drowned there," Karen said, voice cracking. "Back when this land was open, before the HOA existed. She was 8. I was here that day, watching from that same fence line. I ran, but..." Her breath hitched. I couldn't reach her in time. My chest went tight. The wind suddenly felt colder. "I begged the developer to fence it off after that," she said, tears spilling freely now. "When the HOA formed years later, I pushed to make it communal. I thought if other families could use it, it wouldn't feel like..." Her ghost was still there alone. She wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. "But when you bought it and closed it off, it felt like losing her all over again." For once, I didn't know what to say. I'd spent months painting her as the villain. And maybe she was, in her own way. But right then, all I saw was a broken mother, holding on to the only piece of her past that hadn't completely slipped away. She looked down at the photo one last time, then extended it toward me. "I'm leaving town," she said softly. "I wanted you to have this. You own the land now. I just wanted her to still have a place here." I took the picture. My voice barely worked. "Karen, I'm sorry. I didn't know." She nodded weakly. "You couldn't have." She turned to leave, then stopped at the gate. "Don't worry, I won't bother you again. But maybe, someday, plant some flowers by the fence." She loved daisies. I stood there as her car rolled down the street, sunlight flashing across the windshield until it disappeared behind the trees. That night, I sat by the pool again, holding the photograph. The little girl's smile felt like sunlight trapped on paper. The water rippled softly in the breeze, and for the first time since I'd bought this place, it didn't feel like a battle line anymore. It felt like a story, a memory, a monument. The next morning, I went to the nursery and bought a bag of white daisy seeds. I planted them by the fence, right where she'd stood all those years ago. And somehow, the place finally felt whole. Maybe forgiveness isn't something you say. Maybe it's something you plant, quietly, when no one's looking. Weeks passed after Karen's visit, and though her apology lingered in my mind, life began to slide back into its rhythm. The daisies by the fence had started to sprout, small green shoots reaching for the sun. Every morning, I'd check on them before work, coffee in hand. It became a quiet ritual, one I didn't tell anyone about. But one late evening, while sorting through the piles of old HOA paperwork I'd kept in a file box, something caught my eye. A folded yellowed document tucked between property tax forms, one I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't from the county or the HOA. It was hand-typed on an old typewriter, the kind that left faint letters unevenly stamped on the page. Across the top, it read, "Private Property Transfer, March 11th, 1999. That date made my pulse quicken. That was the year before I'd even moved into the state. The names on it were familiar. Michael and Karen Thompson, as sellers. And beneath that, in bold, Lakewood Development Group, LLC, as buyers. It was the original deed transfer. Karen had sold the property to the developer who later built the HOA. But here's the strange part. Under property details, the transfer listed something I'd never seen before. Includes rights and management of existing recreational water feature. The recreational water feature was the pool, and next to it, in pen, someone had scribbled, "For use under community trust agreement only." Subject to legacy clause. Legacy clause? I'd never seen any mention of that in my deed or in the HOA's bylaws. It didn't even sound legal. It sounded personal. Curious. I called Dave the next morning and asked him to dig into it. 2 days later, he showed up at my place holding a stack of county documents and a grin that was equal parts amusement and disbelief. "You're not gonna believe this," he said, spreading the papers across my table. The original development group used a modified land trust. And guess what the legacy clause was? I leaned forward. What? It was Karen's request. She wrote it into the agreement herself before selling the land. It said, and I quote, "This property shall always remain open to the community for remembrance of one lost, and may never be wholly privatized without due notice." I frowned. That doesn't even sound enforceable. "It's not," Dave said. It was symbolic. The developer never recorded it properly, so it's not part of any legal restriction. But it explains why she believed the pool was for everyone. In her mind, it was a promise. I sat back in silence, staring at the papers. A promise she'd carried for more than 20 years. Suddenly, her obsession made a kind of painful sense. The HOA wasn't just her power trip. It was her way of keeping that promise alive. Dave gathered the files. "She wasn't evil, John. She was grieving in slow motion. You just happened to step into her unfinished story." That line stuck with me all day. That evening, I took the old deed, sealed it in a plastic folder, and buried it under the daisies near the fence, right where I'd planted them for Emily. A quiet tribute, a way to leave the past where it belonged. But the story didn't end there. A few weeks later, a real estate agent knocked on my door. "Mr. Lawson," she said politely, "you might want to see this." She handed me a flyer. "Property for sale. Lakeview Lot 42. Former HOA President's Residence." "Karen's house," the agent continued. "Her estate listed it. She passed away last week in Clearwater, Florida. Peacefully. In her sleep." I didn't know what to say. After she left, I sat by the pool, looking at the reflection of the fence, the daisies, the faint shimmer of the moonlight across the water. It felt different, now, quieter, like the place itself was, exhaling after holding its breath for too long. I took the photo of Emily from the drawer and set it beside the pool. The wind rippled across the surface, blurring her reflection with the sky. "Rest easy, Karen," I murmured. "It's home now, for both of you." The water stayed still for a moment, and then a single daisy petal drifted down from the fence, landing right on the photo. I don't believe in ghosts, but that night I believed in peace. After Karen's death, things around Lakewood slowly began to change. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but in small, almost invisible ways. The HOA meetings became shorter, friendlier, and less like battlegrounds. Rachel, the new president, turned out to be exactly the kind of leader this neighborhood had needed all along. Calm, transparent, and allergic to drama. She sent out newsletters with reminders about recycling, bake sales, and summer picnics. There were no veiled threats, no reminder of penalties, no hidden rules, just people trying to live peacefully again. And maybe for the first time since I moved there, that's exactly what we did. Neighbors I barely knew before started waving when they passed. A few even asked if they could use the pool, not for HOA parties, but for their kids' birthdays, for small get-togethers. And this time, I said yes. I didn't charge anyone, didn't make a fuss about forms or insurance or permissions. We just opened the gate, brought out snacks, and let the laughter replace the tension that had once haunted this place. It wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about restoring something broken, not just fences or property lines, but people. One afternoon, Rachel stopped by with a few of the board members. They helped repaint the community sign by the main road, the one Karen had insisted on keeping white and gold. We painted it sky blue instead, soft and welcoming. "Feels more like us," Rachel said with a smile, wiping paint from her hands. As I stood there, watching the colors dry under the afternoon sun, I realized something I hadn't before. Karen had been a part of this place too. For all her faults, for all the trouble she caused, she'd built the framework that allowed this community to exist in the first place. She was its ghost, its architect, and its cautionary tale all at once. That evening, I walked out to the fence again. The daisies were in full bloom now, tall, bright, and wild. Their roots had taken hold deep into the soil, the same soil that had seen so much conflict, so much history. I set down the photo of Emily once more, only now I placed it inside a small weatherproof frame and staked it into the ground beside the flowers. I added a plaque beneath it, engraved with simple words. "For Emily, may peace live where laughter once did." It felt right. After that, I started getting quiet knocks on the gate every so often. A mother with her young son, an older man walking his dog, a couple who'd just moved in. They didn't come to complain or gossip or argue. They came to see the flowers. Some left stones, others left petals or small trinkets. It turned into a quiet tradition, one I never planned, but one that grew naturally, like the daisies themselves. It was strange. For so long, that pool had been a source of conflict. Now it had become a place of connection. One evening, Rachel joined me by the fence. We watched the last bit of sunlight fade over the water. "You ever think she might be watching?" she asked softly. I smiled faintly. "If she is, I hope she sees what she built finally working." Rachel nodded. Funny how sometimes it takes losing control to actually find peace. We stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of cicadas and the gentle rustle of leaves. As the sky deepened into night, I turned on the pool lights. The water shimmered, calm and gold, reflecting the daisies swaying in the soft wind. "I used to think this place was cursed," I said. "Now it feels like it's finally alive." Rachel smiled. It always was, John. You just had to let it heal. The breeze picked up again, carrying the faint scent of the flowers across the yard. And for the first time, I felt like every boundary, legal, emotional, invisible, had finally dissolved into something better. Not ownership, not victory, just belonging. It's been 2 years since everything happened. Sometimes, when I sit by the pool at night, it's hard to believe how different things look now. Not just around me, but inside me too. The neighborhood has grown closer. People talk, laugh, help each other with their lawns. The HOA that once felt like a dictator's council now runs more like a family gathering. Rachel's still president, though she swears every month she's going to retire from it. No one lets her. Every spring, the community hosts a little remembrance event. It's not official, not printed on any agenda. People just come, bring flowers, and plant a few more daisies along the fence. They call it Emily's Garden. It started as a small gesture. Now it's become the neighborhood's quiet heartbeat. I never tell anyone what really happened between Karen and me in those final days. I don't talk about the letter she sent, the midnight confrontation, or the tears on her face when she told me the truth about her daughter. Some stories don't need to be retold. They just need to be respected. But sometimes, when I water the flowers, I think about her, about how her grief got twisted into control, how the need to hold on to something good can turn dark when you never learn to let it go. And then I think about Emily, the little girl in the photo, frozen in sunlight forever. Some nights, when the pool is perfectly still, the reflection of the daisies wavers across the surface, and for just a second, I swear I see a small figure dancing there, happy, free, alive in the ripples of the past. It's not haunting anymore. It's healing. One evening, Rachel brought her teenage daughter over to swim. The girl splashed around, laughing, her voice echoing against the fence. I sat nearby, sipping coffee, and Rachel turned to me. "Hard to imagine this pool was ever a battlefield," she said. "Yeah," I said with a small smile. "Sometimes peace has to fight its way through," she nodded, watching her daughter. "You ever think about selling? Moving somewhere quieter?" I looked at the water, at the fence covered in white blooms, at the plaque that glinted faintly under the setting sun. "No," I said softly. "This is home. It's got roots now." Later that night, after everyone had gone, I stayed out by the pool again. The moonlight stretched across the water like silver silk. A gentle wind rustled through the daisies, and one petal drifted loose, floating down until it touched the surface and spun in slow circles. It felt like the world whispering, "It's done." The house, the pool, the fence, the garden, all of it had become something new. Not just property, not just land. It was a story that had found its ending. Karen's shadow no longer lingered here. It had become part of the soil, part of the flowers, part of the quiet peace that now filled every corner of the yard. I took one last sip of coffee and stood, watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the water. "If you can hear me," I said quietly, "thank you for teaching me what boundaries really mean." A faint breeze swept across the surface. Soft, calm, warm, and then, as the night deepened, the world felt perfectly still. Because sometimes, peace doesn't come when you win. It comes when you finally stop needing to. That's all for today, folks. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!